Hello YouTube. It is with a sad heart that I come to you today, as I have just decommissioned and retired my final desktop Linux computer. So at this point I no longer have any Linux desktops. I have a Mac Mini for my desktop, I have a Windows laptop that I use for playing games, and an iPad that does pretty much everything I need to do. So, unfortunately, desktop Linux just didn't have a place in my lineup anymore, and I want to talk about why I've moved away from it, and why I still love it, even though I'm only using Linux on the server side at this point. So, before we get into this, I just want to say I love desktop Linux. Desktop Linux is what got me into Linux in the first place. When I was a young man and I was running a Core 2 Duo system, and I needed a little more oomph for my horsepower, I turned to Ubuntu, which was at the time, I believe, version 12.04. And that's what really kickstarted my journey into this amazing world of Linux. And I'm still using Linux quite heavily. Everything I do on the server side, which is where I do most of my work, is Linux-based still. So I'm not saying that I'm not going to use Linux, I'm just using Linux in the context of server-side applications and that sort of thing. So enough preamble, let's get into the reasons why I'm not using desktop Linux anymore. So, reason number one. Software. Look, I know that there are alternatives to things like Microsoft Office and Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. I know that those alternatives are great, but here's the other thing that I know. Those alternatives have limitations. The commercial products that are popular also have limitations. The difference is the commercial products, those limitations are shared across the entire user base. And in the alternative products, those limitations are different inherently. So what happens is you're trying to collaborate between these two groups of people, and because the products have different limitations, those two groups have issues collaborating because they're not coming from the same place. They're using inherently different tools. So unfortunately, that's a major stumbling block. And the fact of the matter is, you need this popular software available on your platform in order for it to be successful. And that's always been the case of all platforms, because at the end of the day, these things exist for us to get work done, right? They're great hobbyist things, they're great toys, they're really fun to play with, but the point of them is to achieve something. And I don't feel like it's easy to do that in a team-based environment when everyone's not running Linux. Okay, reason number two. Stability. Every Linux desktop that I've had has eaten itself in some new and unusual way. So the thing is, with desktop Linux, if you stick to the native repos, like the stuff that it comes with out of the box that you can install, you're going to be completely fine. But in reality, who does that? Because the whole point of installing this software is that you're getting a tool you need for the job. Well, I've found that a lot of the tools that I need for the job I perform simply aren't available in the native package managers. Stuff like Slack, businessy type things. For those, oftentimes you'll either have to download them from their website or set up one of the alternative installation package management systems like Flatpak. Not a great experience, but we'll get to that later. So my point is, though, that you're going to have software that's not in the native repos that you need to get something done. What's going to happen is you're going to install that software, and here's where it gets fun. That software is going to bork your system in a new and creative way, and it's going to completely prevent you from being able to do anything with the computer until you fix it. Look, I wish I were exaggerating here, but this has literally been the cause of every crash that I've suffered on Linux that I couldn't easily recover from. And there are things that make this a little safer, like Fedora Silverblue and its atomic snapshot-based system. But the thing is, every distro has a different set of applications that do and don't work on them. And unfortunately for me, when I look at the list of applications I need to do my job, and I look at that compared against the list of apps that work on each distro, none of them work with all of them. It's really frustrating, but there's just no one distro that works with all the apps that I need. So, and I want to point out here that Linux on the server side, rock stable. That thing can survive a tornado or whatever, it'll be fine. Server side Linux is so incredibly robust and hard to break in comparison to the desktop's versions. Okay, reason number 3. Hardware. Look, random shit just doesn't work. Just random shit. It just won't work. And here's the thing, I'm talking about webcams, microphones, peripherals, mice, keyboards, Bluetooth headsets, all these different things you might want to connect to your computer. It's a damn shit show. You never know if it's going to work, and if it's something that you need to have working in order to make money, it's really frustrating when you spend 6 hours attempting to fix it, only to ultimately fail. It's not a good time, and I speak from experience. And that brings me to reason number 4. Ease of use. Linux is just harder to use than Mac OS or Windows, and I hate to say that because Windows is pretty hard to use, but Linux is harder somehow, and it's really frustrating because you look at Windows and you look at Linux, and you ask yourself, is this better for the end user? And the answer is Linux. And that is because with Linux, the entire system is built in such a way that it's for the benefit of the user. With something like Windows, it's built in such a way that it's the benefit for the advertisers. So you have to take these considerations into account when you're considering how easy something is to use. Unfortunately, macOS is just easier than Linux, and I think anyone will agree to that. It's also a lot more stable, going back to reason number 2. And the thing with Linux is if you traverse outside of the expected use case, the perceived notion of how you're going to use a tool, once you adventure outside of that, unfortunately, you run into some real stumbling blocks, and things get very complicated very quickly. And the whole point of this is that you can spend much less time doing tech support for yourself if you just go with a commercial operating system rather than an open source one. And that's where it comes down to for a lot of people, though, is that distinction. That distinction between something open source, created for the good of the community, created for people to contribute and learn something, and then you have proprietary software which is built to perform a specific purpose, which is usually involving how to make money. It's a philosophical distinction, and I think that it's important that we support open source projects, especially desktop operating systems. I actually donate every month to GNOME and KDE, just because I don't want to see them go away. They come up with great ideas, and they do it for the good of the community and all the people around the world who benefit from their software. And so, I get it. If you have a moral reason to use Linux, that's not so different than having a moral reason to not eat meat, or having a moral reason to not participate in something. That's totally valid. And I think that if you're that kind of person who leads by their morals and sets that example, if you can make it work, you absolutely should. But if you're a guy like me, you're just trying to make some money, you're just trying to get your job done, when it comes down to the amount of time spent versus the amount of dollars, the math makes more sense with something like macOS. Anyway, my name was Patrick. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you here in the next one. If you disagreed with anything I had to say, I'm totally willing to hear your comments down below. And I'll admit, my problems, maybe it's a skill issue. I'm not opposed to thinking that I might just not be good at Linux. The thing is, even if I'm not good at Linux, I shouldn't have had to spend so much time on it to get basic things to work. And that's where the issue really comes in across all of these sections. So, again, my name is Patrick. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.